Welcome to Slaying Excel Dragons video number 11. Hey, these are the videos that accompany this book. We are in chapter 5. Oh, this is my favorite chapter. Why? Because we're going to talk about formulas and functions. And this video number 11 covers pages 119 to 143. And this perhaps is going to be the most epic video of this whole book. Because for formulas, we are really going to look at every single type of formula, calculating, lookup, text, logical, and array formulas. And we're going to see all the different elements, the things that can go into formulas, equal signs, cell references, math operators, numbers, built-in functions, comparative operators, ampersands, text and quotes, and even array constants. Now let's just take a look over here at page 120 in the book. This is page 120, and I've mentioned a few times this book tries to be as detailed and thorough in telling a story. And when I'm telling the story, I try not to leave out any pieces. So right off the bat, I just summarize. Here's the different types of formulas that you can create. And here are the different, whoops, I went down to the next page. Here are the different elements. Now we're going to have 10 examples. Actually, we'll have a few more than 10 examples in this video. Now we're going to work in our workbook, the excelisfun Start workbook. And of course, you can download that from the link below the video. Now, we're on the sheet. We're actually going to start on the sheet Formula 1. And here we have it. Before we even talk about the different types of formulas and formula elements, we've got to figure out how to create a formula. Now, we've already made a bunch of formulas in this class. Let me zoom in here. I'm going to hit the F2 key. There it is, an equal sign, cell reference, and a math operator. But notice, we're taking 100 and subtracting 9125. Why do we use cell references and put the numbers in the cells? Here's why. Control Enter. Because if we change this, this is really 155. Boom. Instantly our formula changes. Now I'm going to click in this cell and hit F2. These are called formula inputs. Formula inputs. It's the entire original idea of Frankston and Bricklin, the guys who invented VisiCalc, the first spreadsheet. They had this idea in their head of how you could put all the formula inputs into the cells, and then your formula result would automatically update. And they got this idea because they were tired of typing into a handheld calculator all the numbers. And then when they changed, what did they have to do? They had to retype them. So formula inputs. Now, when do you decide to put a number into a cell? Anytime it can change. For example, you would never make a formula like this. And you would be surprised. People actually make formulas like this. They open up Excel, and then they just type their little formula, 100 minus 91.25. Well, of course, if you come up here and change that cell, that doesn't update. This is called hard coding a number. You never do that. If the number can change, put it into a cell and refer to it with the cell reference. You could see these are hard-coded, so it doesn't update. This one is not hard-coded, so it does update. Now I'm going to Control Z, Z, Z. And I can see up there that it actually did. Control Z is undo. It did, in fact, revert it back. When we create a formula, and we've done this a bunch so far in the class, equal sign is always the first character in the cell. But there's a couple situations where you can create a formula and it doesn't work. Here's one of them. And this is rare, but occasionally I have seen people that do this. They have a space as the first character in the cell for whatever reason, whether it's an accident or not. But that's not the definition of a formula. The definition of a formula is equal sign as the first character in the cell. So there it is. How would we fix that? And by the way, you can, if you're trying to figure this out, you can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 characters in the cell. And if you can't figure out if there's a space, You could actually use the len function. Equals, what do you think len does? It's short for length, and it actually counts characters. So if I say, hey, len function, please count the number of characters in that cell, it'll find the space. And actually, len is really good for finding spaces. It doesn't tell you where the space is in the formula, but it does say 7, and then you can count 6, and you know there's something else in that cell. The way to fix this, of course, is once you figure out that there's a space, you just backspace. And now you can see. And by the way, this is always going to be the case. If your formula isn't a correct formula, there's some problem with it, whether it's a space or the incorrect argument in a function or operator. The cell references will always be black. As soon as you correct the problem in the formula, I'm going to backspace. The color coding called rangefinder shows up, and you know your formula is working. So when I hit enter, boom. One other kind of deadly mistake, and we talked about this in an earlier video. Sometimes people will pre-format the cell. So I'm going to Control 1 with format cell. Control 1 opens format cells, number, and text. I actually used a textbook for accounting classes, and all the 30 or 40 workbooks that were downloaded, which, by the way, I think you should put all of your stuff for a class in one workbook instead of 30 workbooks. But all the templates we downloaded had text formatting. So the students would try to use the templates, and none of their formulas would work. What's the solution? Control 1. General. Now, right off the bat, we went from text to general. When we click OK, it's not going to correct the formula. You actually have to put it into edit mode, F2, and then hit enter. Actually, Control Z. I was going to do that here and keep it here for your reference. So Control 1, general, OK, F2, enter. All right, now on to our next sheet, Formula 2. And I told you this is going to be an epic video. It is. We're going to basically look at there's 9 different formula elements, and we're going to look at all 5 formula types in one video. Right, the first video, we're going to look at an equal sign, cell reference, and math operator. We simply have number of items and price per unit. We simply go equal sign as the first character in the cell reference, math operator, multiplication symbol. And notice I'm using my up arrows, and I get the number of units. This has 1, 2, 3 different types of formula elements. When I Control Enter, it's a calculating formula. It calculates some number answer. And of course, if we change this, absolutely beautiful. The whole reason that Excel was invented. The beauty of Excel, formula inputs change, our formula updates. Our next example, equal sign, cell reference, math operator, and a number. Now we want to talk about number and be sure that we understand this. Now we have annual insurance, and we need a monthly allocation. Equals, up arrow to get a cell reference. Now divided by, that's /. I like to use a / on the number pad, and 12. Why are we putting a number into a formula? I thought we just said the beauty of Excel, the reason it was invented is that you put numbers into cells. So why aren't we doing this? Now, no, I double-click that 12. As soon as you do that, just like if you had a word highlighted in Word, when you click somewhere, it replaces it. Divide by 0 means you can't divide by 0, but I put a 12 there. Now it works. Why in the world don't we do this? The reason why is because if a number never changes, and are the number of months in a year going to change anytime soon? No. So if a number doesn't change, forget putting it in a cell reference. It's just never going to change. So you can type it in. And that's the rule. When the number changes, you put it into a cell and use a cell reference in a formula. When the number doesn't change, forget it. Type it in. Other examples are 7 days in a week, 24 hours in a day, which we'll see when we do time math. And there are other examples also. Our next example, we're going to see equal sign, built-in function, and a range of cells. All right, so here we want to calculate an average. Now, we've seen a few functions. I think we even looked at this one earlier in the class. But here we're going to do this again. I'm going to type this out, equal sign as the first character in the cell, and then AVE. Now, notice there's a drop down. And if you don't know the name of the function and you're trying to do something, it's better to click up here, which we'll look. We looked at this a little bit before. We'll look at this in great detail when we talk about functions later in this chapter. But if you kind of know what you want, or you have the idea of what the letter of the function starts with, then you can get this drop down and you can read this. Returns the average absolute deviations. That's not what we want. That's fun in statistics, but not here. Click on this one, or down arrow returns the arithmetic mean. That's what we want. As soon as it's highlighted in blue, hit tab. Average, like sum and a few other functions, you can actually put a number of ranges separated by commas. But we only need our first argument here. So I'm simply going to highlight these. Notice I clicked with my cursor and dragged. Close parentheses. Now what do we do? Equal sign, built-in function, and a range. And it calculates, it adds them up and divides by the count. Next example, equal sign, cell reference, math operator, and built-in function. All right, so here we have revenue. And we have some expenses. I don't see a line for total expenses, which we would normally have, where we could just take revenue minus total expenses. Now, sometimes you really don't want that total line, and so this formula will work. Equal sign is the first character in the cell, revenue, and then minus. Now, normally we'd click on a cell with the total, but no way, we don't have that total. So what are we going to do? We're going to sum. No way. So you can put functions, cell references, and math operators all together in one formula. I'm simply going to highlight that. This is our substitute for a total expenses cell. Close parentheses. Control Enter. Another example. Now notice this. This is in 2010. This is an error I've been getting. I can't see that stuff there, but when I scroll up and then scroll back down, it all of a sudden shows up again. All right, now here's a great formula here. We're going to see an equal sign, cell reference, and a comparative operator. Now we've talked about math operators. Let's go look at this sheet right here, math operators. It's actually math and comparative operators. Whoa, there's a list, parentheses, exponents, multiplying, division, plus, minus. Those are the math operators. Here are the comparative operators. Totally important sometimes to use comparative operators, like are our sales greater than the bonus hurdle? So we'd have to say if the hurdle to get a bonus is $10,000 and you had 20,000, you have to say is 20,000 greater than or equal to 10,000? And of course that's true, so you would get the bonus. So here are our comparative, greater than, or equal. In Excel, you have to use two separate characters. There's no such thing as in math, a single character for greater than or equal to. Less than or equal to, equal. Ooh, and even not. Now they just kind of had to pick that. There's not a not symbol that we learn in arithmetic. All right, so there they are, all on that sheet right there. So we're going to do that here. Now here's the deal. In accounting, sometimes you have two columns and they have to balance. Debit is left, credit is right. So I'm going to add these up. What's the keyboard shortcut for auto sum? Alt equals. Notice the dancing ants have guessed. It is correct, so I'm going to Control Enter. I'm going to copy this. That little square black box in the corner is called the fill handle, and this is the selection cursor. Move it closer, closer, closer. When you see that angry rabbit, or crosshair as Bill Gates calls it, you can click, left click, and drag. When you see the gray box, you let go. All right, so in accounting and many other situations in business, you have to balance two columns. Now visually, are those equal? They sure look equal to me, but guess what? I want to double check. and we've already talked about this in this class, we know that we can get tricked by number formatting because what you see on the surface of the spreadsheet isn't always exactly what is in the cell. And so accountants and people that are really in charge and they're using Excel to balance everything, they have to have a formula check to see if two things are in balance. So I'm going to say equal sign as the first character in the cell. That's saying I am a formula, or you're telling Excel I'm creating a formula in the cell. I'm going to click on a cell reference, and then I'm going to use a second equal sign. That says that's a comparative operator, not telling Excel that I'm a formula. This is this whatever's in there equal to that? Now, this is our first logical formula. Now, so far, if I scroll up, all of the formulas we've done so far are calculating, meaning they're calculating some answer. This is not a calculating formula. This is only going to give us two things, true or false. Anytime you have cell reference, and some comparative operator, it's a logical formula. All right, Control Enter. False. Oh, OK, no problem. Well, our formula is probably correct, not us, right? Because the formula F2 formulas are not going to look at formatting. They're looking at the underlying number. The reason we do a formula like this is because we really want Excel to double check our work. We've already talked about number formatting and being tricked by number format. So we're going to immediately suspect that we have a formatting problem. So I'm going to highlight all those numbers, and then I'm going to increase the decimal. Look at that. Everything looks fine. I better do it a few more. Oh, there's the problem. There's the problem right there. So once your formula catches this, first off, you probably should not have had it showing debits and credits because we're dealing with money. In accounting, you probably should have had two decimals. But notice, even here with two decimals, it's looking perfect, and it still says false. It's not until we get the third one, boom. All right, so how do we fix this? Well, the accountant would either say, OK, this is wrong, or maybe this one is wrong. Probably not if you're entering numbers into account. It's probably this number that's wrong. So I'm going to delete it, and then when I hit Enter, ding, 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 it's true. All right, let's go down and look at some other examples. Now, this one formula is going to have an equal sign, a cell reference, and the join symbol. Great symbol. The join symbol is ampersand. It looks like that right there. Shift 7 to get that. And then text in quotes. Now, we have a column of first names and last names, and we want to enter them into this column here. So, of course, we would just start typing. Well, first off, I'm a bad typer, so I'd probably mess it all up. And second, it's going to take too long, so I'm going to click Escape. As there usually is, there's usually a formula or some feature in Excel to do what we want. So we can simply join. We can take the stuff from this cell and the stuff from this cell and put it in this cell. So instead of like adding, we're just going to use the ampersand, which says take the two things and just put them together. So guess what? Equal sign, first character in the cell. I'm going to click on that cell and use the ampersand, Shift 7, and click here. Oh, this is so cool. And in fact, as we go through the book, we'll see there's lots of great uses for the ampersand when you want to join two things together. Control Enter. Whoops. That's not what we want. Well, actually, what we want is three things. We have 1, 2, but we want to put a space in between. So I'm going to hit F2. Now, notice two things requires a single ampersand. But if there's three things, we need two ampersands. So I'm going to click right here and Edit. Now, anytime you put words or text into a formula, you have to put it in double quotes. So I'm going to open with double quote. So that's the key to the left of the Enter key, and you use Shift to get to it. And then what do we want? We don't want like a word like text. We just want a space, and then end double quote. That's going to put a space in there. If you just did this, not going to work. Now, and here's a visual cue, right? It is not color coded, so we know there's a problem. But no problem. 1, 2, 3 things requires 2 ampersands. Control Enter. Now, this is called a text formula because it's delivering text. Now we've seen calculating formulas, logical formulas, or true-false formulas, and now we see a text formula. Now I'm going to use our little trick. We see that fill handle. Move your cursor closer, closer, closer. When you see the angry rabbit, you can double click, and it sends it down. Now, the way that double click works is it's looking to the left, 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 left. When it sees the space, it stops one above. It also works if there was stuff on the right or if there's stuff below. All right, let's look at some other examples. Now, in this next example, we're actually going to look at two more uses of the ampersand, the join symbol. Now, our goal here is, here's some sales. And we've been asked, our boss said, hey, count the sales greater than 500. Now, we just have a small data set. Of course, in the working world, we have a huge, 1,000 rows of data. Now, earlier in these videos and in the book, we saw how to use the SUMIFS function. And the SUMIFS function can add given some criteria. Now, here we're not asked to add. We're just asked to count. Well, if there's a sum, and there's actually a few, there's SUMIF and SUMIFS. That's the one we use because you can have one or more criteria. If there's a SUMIF and a SUMIFS with an S, do you think there's a COUNTIF? Yeah, sure there is. Count. There's actually lots of count. Count for numbers. Counta for non-blanks. Count blank. You mean someone would want to count blanks? Yeah, sometimes you have a data set that has blanks, and you need to count how many. Count if, even count ifs. Now, we're going to use this one right here. I'm going to tab. All it needs is a range and the criteria. Well, here's our range. But we got to think about our criteria. Let's go ahead and put our range in. Range. The screen tip's always polite. It's bold. That's the one it's telling you, hey, I need that argument. But as soon as you've entered it, you have to type in the comma. And then the next argument is bold. And it's saying, now please give me the criteria. Now we need greater than 500. Well, the problem is this number sits in the cell. And for this situation, we do not want to type the greater than symbol into the cell. We need to have that 500 sitting there as a number. So we're actually going to have to join a greater than symbol with this. And you're totally allowed to do that. Now, we have to put this in double quotes. So double quote, greater than symbol, end double quote, and then Shift 7 for ampersand, and boom. I absolutely love this. This is great. That means we have greater than, and it will interpret it. You actually could, anyway, it'll see that perfectly. I'm going to hit Control Enter. 3. 1, 2, 3. Now I counted, oh, OK, yeah, that's right, 3. I thought I was counting 4. Now let's change this input, because remember, the whole reason we do formula inputs is because we can change them. So I'm going to change it to 400. Hey, wait a second. 400? Let's see. 1, 2, 3. Shouldn't it be 4? Let's go down here and hit F2 for edit mode. That says greater than. That means 400 is not included. If you want greater than or equal to, you actually have to put an equal sign here. 2 characters. That means as soon as you put the equal sign, there's one extra number that it's allowed to count, and that's exactly that. I'm going to Control Enter, and so now it's 4. Now, actually, in this situation, I don't want that. I just had to show you that. I know that's a tricky part for people when they're learning. I'm going to hit F2. Actually, I could have just hit undo to undo that, but I'm going to backspace and then Control Enter. Let's try 300. So now there should be 6, right? They're all. Let's try 399. So there should be 4. 1, 2 are not counted. The other 4 are. Now, do you see the problem here? Our label is not updating. Now, this is a calculating formula, but we saw just a moment ago that we're allowed to do text formulas, right? We actually can do a text formula where the number of sales is greater than is text in the formula. and we tell our formula, hey, instead of typing this in, it'll always look to that cell. I'm going to click in C44 and type F2. Now I'm going to come to the beginning. This is all text. Remember, if we're going to put text in a formula, it's got to be in double quotes. What else has to be true about a formula? You got to have the equal sign as the first character in the cell. Double quote. Now I don't want any of this stuff, so I'm going to highlight it while the formula's in edit mode and hit delete. Now I don't want a backspace because I want that extra space there, and then I'm going to end double quote. All of that is just text. Now I need to join it to that, so what do? Shift 7 ampersand, boom. Now I can't see that cell reference because the fill color is blue, but you can see it up there. Oh, that is just awesome. Let's try it. Let's do 500. Oh, now that is beautiful. Now we're starting to see the power of Excel. You can actually build little applications like this. We have a calculating formula and a text formula working together to really help the user of the spreadsheet understand what's going on. Now there's still one other thing we could do here to improve this. That 500, I would like to see it as currency. Now I'm going to add some currency format. Now I could Control 1, but we've seen this keyboard shortcut a few times in this class. Control Shift 4. What? How come my formula doesn't pick up the $, the period, and the 00? Well, of course, we've talked about this a few times. Formulas don't look at formatting. But would you believe that there's actually situations where you want numbers and formulas to be formatted? So I'm going to hit F2. Whoops, I hit 2. F2. I'm going to temporarily change the color on this to something super light. I changed the fill and then the font color. All right, I'm going to hit F2. That C43, I would really like it to have currency format. Well, sure enough, there's an actual function they built, like sum or average, some of the functions we've seen already. There's a function that specifically takes numbers from cells and adds the currency number format exactly for text formulas like this. And what is it called? Well, this is dollars, right? It's called dollar. And that's all the dollar function does. By the way, what did I do there? I typed DO, and as soon as it was highlighted in bold, I hit Tab, because as we've seen a few times in this class so far, as soon as you highlight the function in your dropdown, if you hit Tab, it inserts it. That's all the dollar function does. It just takes a number and applies the currency. Now the decimals, you can tell it how many decimals to round to, but by default, it assumes 2, right? Because when you have money, it's usually to the penny. But look at this. That argument right there, decimals, it has square brackets. Anytime you see square brackets, it means you can leave that argument off, and it will assume the default. Now, how do you know what the default is? You actually have to go up to the help and read it. Now, this is actually a hot link. This in our screen tip, if you click on that right there, it opens up Excel help, and it will tell you optional. So this is the description, syntax, decimals, optional, the number of digits to the right. If you omit decimals, it is assumed to be 2. Now, anytime you have a function that you use all the time, you got to come and read help, because it is amazing. Microsoft help is usually not very good. We usually go to Google and search for stuff. Except for when we're dealing with functions in Excel, this help is just stellar. All right, I'm going to click close on this. So I'm going to leave it off, close parentheses, Control Enter. And now look at that. I see my formula up there. I click in the cell, I type 399. There it is. Absolutely amazing. 600, there's only 2. All right, let's look at our next example. If you're keeping up so far and you're just learning formulas, man, you are doing good, because we're covering a lot. This is an epic video. The last example from the textbook, we're going to see an equal sign, a sum function, the large function. We're going to put actually 2 functions together in one formula, a cell range and an array constant. that actually should say array. I'm a terrible speller. By the way, you can hit F7, which is spell check, and it will spell check it while it's in edit mode. All right, here's the deal. We are at a boomerang tournament, and maximum time aloft is an event. And you get 1, 2, 3 scores. And there's different ways to score this, but one way is you add your 2 highest. So this one, for Daniel, we need to add that plus this. And then the next person, you need to add the 2 biggest, so this plus this. Well, now at the World Championships, you can have a list of 200 people, and so I don't want to have to hand do this. Plus, that's the potential for mistakes. So no problem. We can use the large function. Let's just look at the large. There's large and small. Large, if you give it an array, that just means, hey, I'm going to give it this range of cell right there. Comma, and the K means, hey, tell me any large. If I put 1, it'll give me the max. If I put 2, it'll give me the second largest. 3, it will give me the third largest, etc. But no way. We can actually put something called an array constant, because we want 1 and 2, because we're supposed to take the 2 largest. The way it works is you got to know the syntax. Array constants are always started with a curly bracket. Now, the curly brackets and the square brackets, a lot of people don't use those. They're kind of below backspace and to the left a little bit. Okay, curly bracket, and then you put 1, comma 2. Close curly bracket. Now, that's it for large. Now, most times you just put, for K, you just put 2 or 4. You put a single number. But no problem. If you know how to use array constants, another element that can go into a formula, boom, you can get both numbers. Now, when I hit Enter, it only gave me the biggest one. Well, let's put this cell back into edit mode. And I want to show you a trick. We've seen this a few times. If you want to see what the formula really calculates to, you can highlight it and hit the F9 key. Oh, what? It's showing me both of them. Well, sure. When we entered that formula, only one number could go in the cell. I'm going to Control Z. Don't forget, if you look at a formula element hitting F9, that's hard-coded right there. Don't leave that. Control Z. No problem. What is our goal? To add the 2 largest? So I just put this inside the sum. Now, that's getting pretty fancy there, but lo and behold, it works. So 2 functions together, a cell reference, an array constant, and an equal sign. Now, some of us that are learning Excel for the first time, this is kind of overwhelming. But the point of this video is just right up front to show you all the possibilities, and then we'll study them throughout the rest of this book. All right, Control Enter, and then double click and send it down. Notice we did our double click trick again. Move your cursor, and when you see that little crosshair or angry rabbit, double click. And we can check this. Remember how we checked before to audit our formula? I'm going to click here, and I'm going to hold Control and click there. And then I can check down here. Sure enough, look at that. 125.54, just like that. Now, those are all the problems that we saw in the book. And before we go on to 2 other problems, these problems are going to be a preview of what comes up later in the book. You don't have to do these, but I'm going to go take a look right now at our homework file. And this is the Slaying Excel Dragon homework, chapters 1 to 9. This is chapter 5 homework for pages 119 to 143, and there's a lot of problems here from 22 to 30. So 22, 30, answer. 23, answer. 24, answer. 25, answer. Let me use the keyboard shortcut. Notice I'm clicking, clicking, clicking. I'm going to use Control Page Up. I always mix that up. It's actually Control Page Down. Right? There's 26. There's the answer. There's 27. There's the answer. 28, answer. 29, answer. 30, answer. Now, let's go back over to our workbook. And what I want to do now is, we looked over here and we said calculating, lookup, text, logical, and array. But we only so far saw calculating, text, and logical. Now, so far in this book, what we've learned The lookup formulas and array formulas, we're not quite there yet, but I am just going to give you a preview. So in this video, we kind of see all 5 examples. All right, so again, this is a preview. We'll talk about both the lookup and array formulas in great detail later. But here's our situation. We have an employee name, and I want to be able to type in whatever name here, Fred Smith, and have the email address pop up here. Now, what would you do if you did this by hand? You'd say, you'd look at this, you'd remember it in your brain, you go over to the little database, and in the first column, you go, oh, Fred Smith. And then you jump over from the first column, 1, 2, 3. You'd remember that or copy it, and then bring it over here and paste it. Now, lookup functions, there's a bunch of them, but the most common lookup function is VLOOKUP. And guess what? It works exactly like our brain does. It takes this, it looks through the first column, it finds the match, and then it jumps over 1, 2, 3, 4 columns. It gets that thing, and it brings it back to the cell. Now let's just type this out, equals equals VLOOKUP. Now, why is it called, we could guess that the name of the function would be lookup, but why do you think it's called V? It's called V because this is orientated vertically. Now again, this is just a quick preview. All right, lookup value, that's the thing we put into our brain before we go look in the table. I'm going to click right there, comma. The table, well, of course, you doing this by hand would know where this was, and you go over and look at it. But the VLOOKUP doesn't, so you have to tell it where to look. Do not include the field names. Comma, and then the column index. But remember, we look through the first column, but if we just tell it to look through the first column, it would return Fred, but we need to tell it 1, 2, 3, 4. The 4th column has the thing I want to throw back in the cell, so I'm going to type a 4. And finally, comma. We'll talk about this later in great detail, but we just need an exact match because the VLOOKUP is taking Fred Smith, and it needs to go, oh, I found exactly Fred Smith. So we're going to say this one. Now, in logic and math and Excel, true is 1, false is 0. So I always like to put a 0. Again, this is just a quick preview. But watch this. This is just profound. And this is one of the more common functions. Did it look it up? And if I type John Pfeffer, did it work? Absolutely. Now, later when we look at lookup functions, not only will we see how to learn lots about this function, but we'll also see how to build a drop down. So we can just go Christina, and just like that, it looks it up. So that's lookup. The last formula type, we'll see an example down here. Now, this formula type is called array formula. And at this point in the book, we're not quite ready for this. But I'm going to click F2, and that's an example of an array formula. Now, the reason this is called an array is we've seen how to do logical formulas, right? The year function is actually looking over at this column. We know these are serial numbers, days since December 31st, 1899, but we need to get the year out of it. So the year function does that. The fact that we're doing it on let me hit F9 here. That shows you what's there. The fact that we're making this logical formula here, it's not one cell equals another cell. It's a cell equals a range or an array of cells. Array just means more than one item. That brings this formula into the realm of array formulas. We'll talk about that later. Very important type of formula. We're just looking at it here so that we see an example of all 5 types. All right, so we looked at an example of calculating lookup text logical array. And more importantly, or as importantly, we looked at all the different formula elements. And we actually saw more than 10 examples. All right, we'll see you next video.